Former Vice President Mike Pence has written an autobiography entitled So Help Me God, which is in bookstores and available online today. It's a chronicle of the events and the people who forged Pence's character leading up to that historic day on January 6th, 2021, when he reconvened Congress after the attack on the Capitol and completed the peaceful transfer of power. It is my pleasure to be joined now by former Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Pence, thank you for coming on. You know, your book is more than just the events of that day and what led up to it and what happened after it, but it does focus a lot on your time in the White House. Let's go back for a moment, if you would. Did you ever imagine Donald Trump would choose you to be his running mate in 2016?
Not in the least. And as I write in So Help Me God, the weekend that we got the phone call that we would be considered for vice president in the summer of 2016, I'll never forget my daughter Charlotte looked at me and said, Dad, we all saw this coming. And, you know, it's the only thing you'd hear from a daughter, right? But I didn't see it coming. I never expected it. I was serving as governor of the state of Indiana. I'd been in leadership in the Congress of the United States, standing for conservative values. But to have had the privilege to not only run, but win and serve in the Trump-Pence administration was the greatest privilege of my life. And Mark, despite the fact that it did not end well in those difficult days, I hope when people buy So Help Me God, they'll see that it is a fulsome defense and description of the record of the Trump-Pence administration, a record that left our country stronger, more prosperous than ever before, that saw conservatives appointed to our courts at every level, gave America a new beginning for life. And I'm incredibly proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration, and it was a great privilege to be able to put it on the page.
In your interview with ABC News' David Muir, you mentioned that President Trump had many bad advisors, which he tended to listen to more than the good ones. Did he ever ask you for your advice in critical times? And if so, how often did he take that advice?
You know, for the 4.5 years that we served and in the course of the campaign, President Trump and I developed a close working relationship. President Trump was not only my president, but he was my friend. And I always made a practice as vice president of sharing my advice with him in private, and I did often. And as I recount in So Help Me God, there were times that we differed, and times that I believe that I helped prevail upon him, but taking a different course. But I always kept that in private because I thought that was fitting for the role of Vice President of the United States. You're there to support the president, and the only loyalty that you have that's higher than that is to God and the Constitution. And it was my commitment to the Constitution, my oath of office that ended with a prayer, So Help Me God, that led us through those difficult days in January. But to have been there at the president's side through so many consequential years and accomplishments for America at home and abroad is something I'll cherish the rest of my life.
President Trump has been subpoenaed by the January 6th committee, and keeping in mind that the committee would likely be disbanded if the Republicans take the House after this midterm election, should he testify if the committee is not disbanded, and would you testify if asked?
Well, I'll leave it to the president and his attorneys to determine what's appropriate. But I must tell you, Mark, from the very outset, I was concerned about the partisan nature of the January 6th committee. I served in Congress for 12 years. I couldn't imagine the creation of a committee in the Congress that was entirely appointed by the Democrat Speaker of the House. And while I didn't stand in the way of members of my staff providing them with information, Congress had no right to my testimony. We have a separation of powers in this country under the Constitution, and I believe for the vice president to testify before the Congress under such circumstances would create a terrible precedent.
The book is called So Help Me God. It is in bookstores and online now. Former Vice President Mike Pence, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be with you.